Have you ever wondered why chronic acid reflux defies conventional remedies? Join me on this journey through my personal battle with chronic acid reflux, where I discovered a profound shift in understanding that transformed my entire approach to healing. Let's dive into how my perspective evolved and the insights that could change everything you thought you knew about this common condition. Hello friends, my name is Jayshul, and I know that if you found yourself deep in this journey, then you'll likely understand that there are malicious forces that are out there intent on keeping us in poor health, that are draining us physically, emotionally, and financially. I know that if you're someone that's watching this video, you're committed to taking back control of your wellness. So I invite you to subscribe to my channel and join me on this journey navigating mind, body, and soul wellness, because together we can take back control of our wellness and in turn inspire a more conscious society. Now, as always, please remember that none of what I'm going to share with you today is considered medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. Okay, so let's get into my revelations about chronic acid reflux. Before I get started, none of this should be taken as gospel. Please apply your own discernment and see what resonates with you. These are based on my experiences from navigating this condition for just over 2 decades, as well as a lot of trial and error and going down many different rabbit holes. So the first revelation is related to, do we have too much acid or do we have too little acid? Now you have the conventional approach that tells you you have too much acid. You have the alternative space that tells you you have too little acid. Now the too much acid tells you, well, you have too much acid, so we need to give you something to reduce the acid. Hence why they give you PPIs to try and reduce the acid. On the alternative side, you have too little acid, hence why they give you hydrochloric acid, or they recommend that you take apple cider vinegar to boost up your acid levels to facilitate the digestion of foods. Where do I land? Right in the middle. I think there's half-truths to this approach and half-truths to the alternative approach, and I'm going to explain. So as mentioned, with the conventional approach, they try and reduce the acids. The reason for doing this is to eliminate the acid, so you don't have acid reflux, you just have reflux, which is also not good, because what is taking place is the digestive process has been curtailed by not allowing your stomach to produce those acids by taking PPIs, your proton pump inhibitors, and stopping the stomach from producing the acid. It doesn't break down the foods in a normal manner that it should, and so your nutrient absorption starts to diminish. And from a long term of taking PPIs, I started to develop a lot of deficiencies in vitamins, minerals, and so forth. So I don't think this was the optimal approach for me because of the long-term effects. The risks of taking these PPIs for the long term started to outweigh the benefits of taking PPIs. And my understanding now is that that was very much a band-aid sort of approach to dealing with this condition. It didn't solve the underlying root cause of the problem. Now the reason why I think it's a half-truth, I think there are too much acids in our body. However, it's too much of the wrong types of acids. On the alternative side, they say you have too little acids, we need to give you hydrochloric acid. And I did move from this end of the spectrum over to the alternative side. I went down the rabbit hole of taking hydrochloric acid, taking the apple cider vinegar. I tried them in so many different variations. When the hydrochloric acid didn't work, I went back to the naturopath. I told her, hey, the hydrochloric acid tablets are not working. I'm still getting acid reflux. She said, it's probably still too little. You need to start slowly increasing these hydrochloric. I tried that variation. I increased my dosage, and the acid reflux was still there. It just kept coming worse and worse. And I couldn't continue with that approach because it just wasn't working. I tried the apple cider vinegar with the different variations, same story. That's when I came to the understanding that it's the wrong type of acids. There's different types of blends of acids that are naturally produced by our stomach, and the right approach would be to support the production of those natural stomach acids to facilitate the digestion. And once I started understanding this, I recognized that this approach, that the alternative space was following in terms of increasing your acidity levels, is not 100% correct. It's only a half-truth. A half-truth because it's all about supplying the body, or the body producing the right blends of acids. And unfortunately, we don't have the right blend of acids in a capsule form or a tincture form. It's something that we need to allow the body to produce naturally. So it's going back to the roots and trying to see what can I eat and consume naturally to help facilitate the production of those normal acids. So there we go. That was a profound revelation in terms of how my understanding of this condition changed, and what I think makes a fundamental difference in terms of understanding chronic acid reflux from a deeper level. So there we go. That's the first revelation. Let's move on to the second. Next revelation is that acid reflux is often correlated to a very poor digestive system. And this revelation is something that segues well from the first revelation because they are so intricately linked. It's not due to too much acid, it's not due to too little acid, it's due to a very poor digestive system that is not breaking down the foods that we consume. And when we consume these very complex foods, especially processed foods, we end up creating an additional burden on our digestive system. When we're consuming proteins too, even though some of them may not be complex proteins but just unprocessed proteins, they're still very complex for the body to be able to digest. Same goes with fats. When we consume fats, we may not have the ability to break down the fats because these are complex type foods. And that causes the environment or the digestive system to weaken over time. Especially if we're not getting a diet that is comprised of the right types of foods that help produce and stimulate the digestive system. So what happens is it starts creating this effect of acid reflux. Not in isolation, there are other factors as well. But essentially what happens is the digestive system becomes very weak. We resort to PPIs, or that's administered from a conventional approach. We take the PPIs long term, and that causes more harm. And the reason why it causes more harm is it then starts creating an environment that is conducive for bad bacteria and viruses to flourish, because there's no acidity within the stomach because the PPIs stop the stomach from producing the acids that are needed to digest foods and create an inhospitable environment for these nasty buggers. So they have a party down there. And because of that, it causes an even weaker digestive system. And so when we consume these complex foods while on PPIs, what essentially happens is this environment within our stomachs or gut starts to allow for these bad bacteria to receive more food, because these foods are not digested. So they start consuming these foods and releasing toxins and acids and creating this highly acidic environment, which essentially is the causative factor for acid reflux. So it perpetuates itself because it's a weaker digestive system that you are weakening even further. And the solution lies in trying to resolve the issues that the digestive system is facing so that we can make it robust again by supplying it with the right nutrients, minerals, and foods, we can re-stimulate the digestive system and start that healing process to get back to living without chronic acid reflux. The third revelation is related to your emotional state. It's your emotional state as well as your relationship to food. What type of relationship do you have with food? Are you just taking your food and inhaling it? Which I see most people doing out there these days, is they just inhale their food. There's no relationship, there's no spiritual connection to the foods that we eat. And unfortunately, these factors over time lead to poorer and poorer digestion, poorer and poorer connection to the body and what the body needs from a nutrient perspective. Now, I'm very much guilty of also not being mindful when eating, and something I'm trying hard as possible to try and incorporate within my practices is to try and become more aware. Be more aware of your emotional states during the day, and especially when you're eating, because these have a profound effect on the digestive process. A lot of us are eating in that fight or flight state, and that often results in poor digestion and chronic acid reflux. Eating during a state of fight and flight, your body is in a stressful situation and is not in the right capacity or the right framework to allow for optimal digestion. So that is a profound reason why we should try and practice more mindful eating, try and be with our meal and restore that spiritual connection between us and our foods that we are eating. This will also help lead us to eating better types of foods, more healthier types of foods, and to really restore that connection between what we're consuming and what our body really needs, and get back in touch with what the body needs instead of just eating based on what is marketed to us or what our senses try to gravitate towards because of how the foods are processed and the various stimulative effects that these foods have. So it's really important not to inhale all your foods, and try and really build that mindful connection to foods, and observe your emotional state throughout the day. Observe how you are reacting to certain triggers in your life, because these are going to be helpful in terms of recognizing when is that right time to consume. Am I in a relaxed state? Am I being triggered by some event in the day, which means that I'm not in the best position possible to be consuming this meal? Maybe I should wait. Like I said, this is still something I'm working on. I haven't yet addressed this fully. I think it's going to take a lot of practice because it's going to require a lot of shift in behavior. But I think when I do notice I'm able to get into that state, the digestion is just so much better and the acid reflux is much less or non-existent. Something to be really mindful of. Stay with the food, eat the food, chew the food properly, taste it, and then take it in, rather than just inhaling food for the sake of inhaling. I see a lot of people just walking and eating and just grabbing fast foods, not being mindful about what they're consuming. And those types of behaviors trigger or contribute to even more symptoms of acid reflux. My fourth revelation is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach from a diet perspective to solving chronic acid reflux. What I've noticed is that there are different foods that may work for me versus somebody else. A lot of it is trial and error. Yes, there may be a lot of commonalities on that list that would trigger acid reflux. Think of your coffees, think of chocolate, things that are very acidic in nature that will trigger chronic acid reflux in some people but not trigger it in other people. Other times it's a delayed reaction and we're just not observant or in touch with ourselves to recognize that those foods are also causing chronic acid reflux. So what I think is needed is a lot of trial and error experimentation. I'll give you an example. White potatoes is sometimes recommended by some to be consumed if you have chronic acid reflux to boost the digestive system as well as facilitate the healing of the digestive system. However, For me personally, white potatoes, the minute I consume it, I get chronic acid reflux. Sweet potatoes generally tend not to be a problem, but this is something that each person needs to identify. What are those different types of foods that resonate with you and that don't give you the chronic acid reflux symptoms? It's also the spiritual connection we build with the foods that we consume. Now, one thing I've noticed is whenever I consume melons, you either eat melons alone or you leave them alone. When we consume melons with other foods, or it's contaminated with other foods during the digestive process, it often causes acid reflux for me. So it's something that I need to be very mindful when I am consuming those types of foods. I've got to consume them alone, give them enough time to digest, to fully digest before I decide to take my next meal. The fifth and final revelation relates to how many meals should you be consuming in a day. Should you be consuming frequent meals throughout the day as is the conventional guidance, or should you be intermittent fasting or restricting the amount of meals that you consume? I think it's a careful balance that we need to establish. Although I very much agree with the alternative side, because there's so much of energy that goes into the digestive process, we need to try and establish a reasonable balance. I don't think going to the extreme of fasting and only eating one meal a day was helpful. I tried that for many years, and in effect what happens is we start running our bodies on the wrong types of fuel, often running on adrenaline instead of glucose, because we're depleting ourselves of glucose, which is also not optimal. But it's about finding that right balance of the right number of meals. Maybe it's 3 meals a day, maybe it's 2 meals a day, spacing it out to allow the digestion to take place. Eating when you really truly feel hungry versus eating for emotional reasons. So it's trying to really find that right balance and to try and not put so much energy burden, because the digestive process takes in a lot of energy to be able to digest those meals. So it's finding that right balance so that you're allowing for that energy to go into the healing work to be able to restore your digestion. So there you go. Those are my top 5 revelations about chronic acid reflux. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next video where we will cover diet as well as supplementation for chronic acid reflux. See you in my next video.